Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the 1904 Club podcast. Of course, the Hull City podcast from the Hull Daily Mail this morning. I'm joined by Burnsy, Prutts and Kathryn. Kathryn, how are you?
Not bad, thanks, Baz. How are you?
Yeah, good. Yeah, quiet weekend all told. Nothing much to talk about. Prutts?
I'm good. Apologies. I know, obviously, we're not doing this in real time, but I was late. For everyone listening, and you three have been very lovely and courteous. I mean, I bet you were slagging me off to the nth degree before I came on, which is absolutely correct.
I mean, it's not just behind your back. You were a shambles, aren't you?
To my face. In fact, I enjoy it to my face as well as behind my back. That's for slagging off.
Just a bit like the time you ruined Jamie Mackey's media career a couple of weeks ago live on Sky Sport.
He's got a media career, has he? Jesus.
Well, he hasn't now.
It's because I'm a horrible person. Unlike Kathryn
really.
And Burnsy. You're in my bracket.
Burnsy, are you feeling better? I know you've had the plague.
Yeah, I have had the plague. I'm all right. Hopefully, I'll get through it without sounding like Bob Fleming from the Fast Show. So we'll be all right, really. Hopefully, I'm looking forward to the chat. But for me, there's only one thing to talk about. Is it time to sack Tim Walter, or are you going to back him? We've got a lot of reaction.
Strong start, Burnsy. Love it, man.
Well, basically, there's no point farting about that. That is the issue. I think we've come to the conclusion after Saturday that, is it working? Do you cut your losses now and say, look, there's not really any improvement? I know this fabled different style. Is it happening? What's it about? What's the point of having any midfielders? Because you just play it at the back all the time. You're supposedly playing out from the back. I'm starting to wonder whether they're playing into the back more. It's just. And yeah, you look at it and think, well, hold on a minute. Didn't lose on Saturday. They were not 1 in 5, but it was the bottom club. They looked awful in the first half. Portsmouth City looked absolutely abject in the second half. And I just think you've arrived at the point where somebody's going to make a decision. And we'll chat about it. Loads of reaction. I'll give you a couple. The stuff that's come into the 1904 Club this morning has been very measured. It's not a hanging party or anything like that. But Jordan says if he doesn't get a win on Tuesday night at Oxford, he's gone for me. Can't keep dropping points like we have. HCAFC Thought says, I just don't see how this works. We still have a fighting chance this season, but you have to make the change early. Feel like we're treading water until the inevitable. Lee Walker says, time for a change. Don't think the players are fully bought into his playing style. Jordan says, performances haven't changed since August, September with the new players in. And Alan Parkinson says, time to go and bring in a knowledgeable championship manager. Tim Walter's play too slow and predictable. Are the back four told to miss midfield when playing out? Well, presumably. Also, too many average players. I don't think that's his fault necessarily. What's wrong with the occasional long ball? Hando needs to think quicker when ball at the feet. And Matt Lorenzo says, time to go, I'm afraid. We were promised incisive attacking, heart attack football. And what we've got is a ponderous style wedded to very obvious tactics that show little sign of working in their current implementation. And calling out the fans has sealed his fate, in my opinion, says Matt. So there's a little ground basis for discussion.
So the backdrop of this, for those that aren't aware, is that Hull City played Portsmouth on Saturday, started the game a bit slowly, first couple of minutes, then took the lead with a really, really well-worked goal from João Pedro, his first, and one of his only touches in the game, actually, as it would transpire. And then City were 1-0 at half-time up. Second half was an absolute shambles. They conceded within seconds to Josh Murphy of the restart. That kicked off quite a negative reaction from the fans inside the MKM Stadium. Another really, really good crowd inside. And the second half was a complete and utter mess, really. And Portsmouth should have won the game, but for a brilliant double save by Panda in stoppage time, they would have lost the game. And they were roundly booed off at full time. And then obviously you probably will be aware that in his radio interview with my colleague and good pal Mike White at the BBC, he raised questions about the backing of the supporters, which understandably didn't go down well. What I would say is, in his post-match media conference with me, he was much more measured. He sort of played the we need to stick together party line, which you would expect any manager in that situation to have said. But unfortunately, by the time he got to me, I think to many fans, the damage had been done. Kathryn, as a fan, I know you were at the City Ground on Saturday doing the Forest West Ham game, but obviously you were at Derby last weekend. You would have followed all the fallout, listened to the interviews, read everything about Saturday and Tim's response. Where are you at with it?
I think I'm still where I was at when I last spoke to you, when we hadn't won a game, and then obviously went on and won 3 games. And we were kind of talking about how long did Tim Walter have then. I still don't know what the plan B would be if they did sack him. And I think that's kind of the thing that's making me say, well, don't sack him unless you've got a plan B, because what's the plan B? Is it David Myler? Because I'm assuming Tim's coaching staff would go with him. Who's kind of below him that could actually take this team on for a few games?
Andy Dawson, probably.
Well, there we go. And I do think, though, it is kind of inevitable that he's not going to be here for a long time. That's kind of my opinion on it. So not sacking him now, or if they lose at Oxford, might just be kind of delaying what feels like the inevitable. But my concern is that the club haven't planned to sack him. So what the hell do they do if they do sack him? That's my concern, because I think that's kind of what we had with Shota a couple of years ago, where they didn't really have a plan B. Andy Dawson was there. Then it was all a bit scattergun for a bit. And then they finally got Liam Rosenior, which obviously turned out all right. But yeah, I think that's my concern with it at the minute. But it does feel like the comments about the fans, the reaction from the fans, unless he can kind of somehow pull this back and they go on another 3-game winning run, which at the minute feels unlikely, but not impossible. It does feel like we're kind of at the start of what will inevitably at some point be the end. It's just a case of when, potentially.
Prutts, the funny thing about this is, and I was saying this to Burnsy just earlier on, they didn't lose on Saturday, and I think everybody would agree it felt like a defeat. Louis Coyle said that to me. Tim Walter said it felt like a defeat. They've drawn 3 in a row. They haven't won since beating Cardiff, but they have taken the lead in all the 3 games. The Burnley, away at Derby, and obviously against Portsmouth. But the reaction, when a manager gets that level of reaction, it's almost like it's gone past the point of no return now.
Yeah, I mean, it's given the run of form against the teams that they've come up against, it was all looking rosy, wasn't it, up until QPR. After QPR, there's a thumping from Norwich. Norwich are a better team. Sunderland are a better team. Burnley are a better team. Derby arguably have been better so far this season. And everyone goes, oh, but Pompey are bottom of the league. Pompey are really, really struggling. They're finding it tough getting back, but they have been in more games than they haven't been in. They've yet to be kind of really, really, really blown away in a game. And correct me if I'm wrong, unless I think they got done 6th in this stuff. So obviously, apart from that,
they were in that until the 5th. In fairness,
yeah, it was really close until that 6th one went in. So I totally get the frustration of the fans. I absolutely get that. I think the thing that always makes you think, and I'm not saying for 1 second it's identical to the Wayne Rooney situation at Birmingham City, but when there's a lot made about philosophy and style of football and you don't see it, then I think it's Burnsy's bugbear on here, isn't it, Burnsy, where it's hard enough to win a football match in the Championship. To say that we're going to win it in this particular style is bananas. The change has been made because the owner wants this type of football. Just don't say that. The change has been made because the owner wants something different. And when you say different, you think, well, bit more progress, top 6. And it's not come to fruition. Now, I was reading a few of Tim's comments off the back of it about being quite straight talking and with it being his second language, sometimes there's no need for them to mess around kind of talking in riddles. I don't think that's true. I think most English and British managers that I come across are straight talking. We had Paul Warne on after the game on Saturday against Stoke, where he had frustrations in the game. He also quite rightly called out his own players, saying potentially he should have Nat Phillips should have had a second yellow card, which would have got him off the pitch. I talk to straight talking managers all the time. Chris Wilder's another one. John Eustace, another one. So I don't agree with his comments there. Of you mean I'm shooting from the hip, and maybe people aren't used to it. Rubbish. We are used to straight talking managers in this division. What we're not potentially, or what fans aren't going to swallow too much is we're going to play football like this because I've got this background and I'm very kind of entrenched and educated in this way of playing football, and everyone paying the money and going, well, that doesn't look anything like what they're talking about. And fans absolutely have the right to be able to do this. It annoys me where philosophies and style and the debate about that is almost said in this otherworldly thing, like fans wouldn't understand. Rubbish. You understand crap when you see it, don't you? And that's and if you've been at the MKM so far this season and you see a first half against a team that's bottom of the league, even though it's a big club at the bottom of the league, you see a goal go in straight after half time, and you see yourself kind of really entrenched in mid-table, but with other big teams around them. Wednesday, Stoke, Derby, Oxford United have done well so far this season. They're unbeaten at home till the weekend. So again, it's another tough game for Hull City. I think the frustration is obvious. The frustration is right to come out because and again, it's because City put themselves in a place where they're going, we're going to sell you this at the start of the season, and you've paid for it, and you've not seen it. I totally get it. Whether it's the point of no return, I always think a good week in the Championship can change people's opinions to a certain degree. You get 3 wins on the bounce, and everything's a bit more rosy, but then being 6 points off the top 6, but of course only 3 points off the bottom 3. So I understand the frustration. It just bugs me a little bit when the change is made. We're told that a change is made from a purely stylistic point of view, and it's yet to materialise.
I think that's the key thing as well, isn't it, Burnsy? That fans have been sold a dream about a style of play, an ethos, and I think at the start of the season, fans were prepared to be patient with the new manager because he's come from a different country. It would take him time to get to grips with the Championship, but equally with the caveat being he needs to get wins along that. But also the way the recruitment played out, the fact it took the club an awful long time to get players in, and the message was very much of patience, that this is going to take time. But I think fans' patience starts to wear thin with supporters when they see the same stuff every week and there's no improvement. And 13 games is now a decent yardstick of where they're at. They've won 3, and also I think part of the reaction on Saturday was born out of just the dross they've watched at home in 2024 so far. They've played 19 games in League and Cup, albeit there's only 2 cup games because they lost both of those against Birmingham and Sheffield Wednesday. They went out to Birmingham. The Birmingham FA Cup was a draw, obviously, although they needed a late goal to get a replay. But the point being is they've only won 3 games in 2024, and for much of the year, it's just been they've been asked to turn up. Adjun and the club have got the ticket pricing strategy right, but fans have turned up week after week. They're averaging well over 20,000. People are turning up week after week after week, and they're just sick to the back teeth of watching garbage. Quite frankly, they're watching garbage. Like the first minute, the crowd, people talk about the atmosphere, but the crowd were up on Saturday from the kickoff. João Pedro kicks off. They go all the way back at snail's pace to the goalkeeper. They play 3 or 4 passes, putting the ball at risk, but going nowhere. They give the ball away, and Portsmouth get a shot from the edge of the box. It was a muffled shot because it deflected off, I think, Hughes into the arms of Pandor. But they've gone from having that little bit of momentum at the kickoff all the way back, putting the ball at risk and trying to play out. But they didn't do that. They were knocking it around in the 6-yard box, going nowhere. You knew what was going to happen because we've seen it a million times before. They gave it away, and Portsmouth have got a shot at goal inside a minute.
Yeah, we were promised something different, weren't we? And it's not different and exciting, and it's not real. Well, it is different because I keep coming back to what the point of the midfield is. They don't seem to play through the midfield, and part of the, I think, I hate the phrase, but part of the modern. Excuse me, I told you I was going to be Bob Fleming. Part of the part of the modern parlance is inviting the press, and then you play through the press. Well, Portsmouth were pressing, certainly second half, and they just couldn't play through the press. And I thought, well, what's the point of that? Vary it up, get a quick ball out, release your wingers, dink one into midfield. It was just, what's different about this? And I'm not convinced there's anything different. It doesn't look, it's improving. They're not far away, in fairness to them, because they've led in games, as we've said, but they just can't see it through. And part of that goes back to recruitment. They've not got enough strikers. We've said that all along. A couple more messages, and then I'll shut up and let other people talk. Tom Collins says, actually, Robin Weston says 2 big games coming up, lose both, and how can he stay, especially going into the break? Tom Collins says, I still think it's too early to get rid. Saturday was dire, but if the powers that be think he's a good manager, then you need to give him time to get his philosophy across. I'm more concerned by the post-match interview, if anything. Sounded like he was losing the plot. And East Hull Tiger says to rip it up after 13 games is madness. After a summer of rebuild, good teams are built over a period of time, not overnight. Who is now out there to come in? Can only think of Mowbray. Health problems are Kevin Muscat. The rest are average at best. Does he need more time, Kathryn? East Hull Tiger makes a fair point. It's only 13 games.
Yeah, it does. It does remind me a little bit of my time covering West Ham, with their manager is kind of in the same boat, where it's kind of like people think it might be too early to sack him, but the fans aren't convinced, and it's hard to see kind of a way of them turning it around. And that's kind of how I feel with Tim Volter at the minute. I just think you've got to get the fans back on side, but he doesn't strike me as somebody that would, and I'm not saying he needs to come out and apologise and be like, I'm really, really sorry, but I think it would actually go a long way if he came out and said, look, what I kind of said the other day, or how I worded it, wasn't the right way to word it. Maybe come out and say it after the Oxford game, depending on, obviously, it hits a bit better if it's after a win than if it does after a defeat. But I actually think that would go a long way with people if he kind of came out and said, heat of the moment, I maybe said something that was kind of construed the wrong way. Because he's not got that credit in the bank that Liam Rosenior had with the fans. So the fans are already probably not on his side, but kind of, he didn't have that credit with them that Rosenior would have done if Rosenior had said something similar. I actually think that would go a long way with people, and that might be a way for him to kind of, get the support that he's asking for.
Go on, Burnsy.
The fans more upset that he's perceived to have a little go at them than the fact that the team haven't won in 5 games. They've been abject in the second half, and people can't see what the system's really about. Are they more upset about that? Because I had to listen again to his comments this morning, and he said we have to work together. We need a push from the fans. They can help us. That essentially was his message, and then it turned into, he's having a blimey. Fletcher's popped in.
He's a
so are people more upset about what he said?
I think it's the way he
more
said
upset
it.
about what he said.
He said, I heard the Portsmouth fans, and they were supporting their team all through the game, even when they were losing. And I think that was the dig, because he had a bit of a one, and I think Mike pushed him a little bit to kind of say, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, I heard the Portsmouth fans, and they were singing even when they were losing. And it was kind of like we were winning and you weren't even giving us enough support. I just think he didn't help himself in that scenario. Mm. And yeah, the fans, it is also to do with the results and the fact that football's not good enough. But when the results aren't going your way, help yourself out by bringing the fans back on board. Don't have a dig at them. That's not going to help you. I just couldn't get I know emotions are always heightened after a game, and he's probably frustrated himself that they've not won. And yeah, obviously Mike's asking him the questions, but I just felt like he had his little dig, as what Burnsy sort of said, and then he went back in and said, yeah, well, I heard the Portsmouth fans, and almost were saying, well, like, they're better than what you were giving us. That just doesn't help you. So I do think actually him coming out and saying, I'm sorry if I offended anyone, might at least make people go, okay, well, he's had a think and he's realised he shouldn't have probably said that.
Fletch. I'll come to you in just a sec. Welcome to the show, mate. Prutts, when a manager, and I have, look, in fact, in full disclosure and in trying to be balanced, there have been some fans that said, actually, what he said, he didn't say it particularly well, but the point he was trying to make was fair, that the home atmosphere isn't great. By the way, the away fans, the Portsmouth fans, were very good. As away fans generally are up and down the country. They very often at grounds up and down the country, the away fans, particularly if things are going well, will outsing home fans. But when you're on a sticky wicket, aren't you? When you, in any way, shape, or form, when you criticise your own supporters, however that looks, whether it's bad, indifferent. Ultimately, there's a strength of feeling there, and he has upset a lot of supporters with those comments.
You only really go there, I think, when it's kind of ripcord time, and there's no return. It's almost akin to the never complain, never explain approach from the Royals, isn't it? Where he's basically, as Kathryn says, the first bit that going back to what Burnsy said, and then the follow up of and this is me not second guessing City fans, but any fan hates comparison, don't they? They hate comparison. Well, that mob's better than our mob. And when your manager says that, you go, come on, mate. Like, in it together, you can't really go down that. No matter what he might be thinking. Pompey fans, I've played down there as a Southampton player. They can be absolutely horrible. But I tell you what, they never shut up. They always sing. Fratton Park's got an atmosphere. And it's been slim pickings if you're a Pompey fan for the last God knows how long. So to get back into the second tier and see what's happening, they're really kind of fighting through it. But that's their approach. Now, the MKM and having covered games at the MKM, regardless of who's in town, it's a different vibe to Fratton Park. Different, not better, not worse, just different. So that's why City fans have got to be very, very kind of proud of their own unique approach to football matches. And the minute that Tim says, the first portion, I think, of what Tim says, I don't think is too offensive, but is also going to take into account how reactive and hysterical in the best and worst possible ways that fans can be. You know what I mean? It's like going along the line saying that kid's ugly. Well, that kid's got a mum and dad somewhere. They're going to react horrendously to that, as they should do, because they love it implicitly. The same thing with a fan of a football club. The minute you say, well, you're not doing your bit, I tell you what, mate, we are doing our bit. You might have levelled out ticket prices. It still cost an arm and a leg to go to a football match. And it's still meant to be entertainment, and it's meant to be fun. And I'm coming away potentially from what football actually is, because a lot of it is grinding results out. A lot of it isn't pretty. But because we inherently love it, we'll still turn up and pay our money. So that's a fan's literal buy-in is their ticket. So when it's almost kind of like, oh, well, come on, give us an hand. You're going, no, give us something to sing about, then you might have half a chance. Now, it's a bit chicken and egg. I do get that. But, Kathryn, you're absolutely right with regards to that. The minute you kind of step into that debate, now the debate on Tuesday is what he says potentially about the fans, not how he sets the team up, not how he gets a result, not how he goes to a place which is really tough so far this season to come away with at least a point. It's about, oh, Christ, is he going to go after the fans again because they're not making enough noise?
Fletch, morning.
Good morning.
I'm sure you've got some stats for us, my old China.
Oh, just flowing out this this five head that I've got here. Yeah. I'll kick off with, and in relation to what we're talking about, Hull City at home in 2024 have won 3 games in the league. There's only 2 clubs in the entirety of the 92 best clubs in the country that have a worse record. One is Burton Albion, who have 4 points in League One. The other is Carlisle United, who are facing back-to-back relegations as things stand. So I completely accept that the fans are going to be, who are paying good money, are going to be peeved, very peeved, that their team are not winning home football matches. Now, a small percentage will be lucky enough to see what they can deliver away from home. In that time, there's been 2 managers who, when it comes to the city of Hull and the knowledge of the city of Hull, couldn't be further apart, because Liam Rossini had a family connection. Tim Volter has come in this season. Now, when things like the fans are concerned are raised, I would imagine that Liam would understand it, having been a player and as a manager, and understand what it means. Tim Voltor will also understand what it means for whatever football club you coach or manage when your fans frustrated. But I can tell from his comments that he's under pressure. Should he have said it in the way he said it? No. But I sympathise because we're all human beings. And if he's feeling the pressure of having to deliver, he needs to obviously keep a much calmer lid on things when he's facing the media. But at the same time, I understand why he's maybe lost it in an interview, because he knows that he is not delivering, and his management and his coaching staff aren't delivering what he's being brought in for, and that is to win football matches on home soil.
In fairness, his mantra has been from his very first press conference to now is pressure is a privilege. And obviously the way he conducted himself, and it's not the first time, in fairness.
I thought it was for tyres.
Yeah, I thought he was quite disrespectful to Mike and also to the supporters in the way he walked off at the end of the interview and refused to answer questions. Look, as you say, Fletch, it is difficult, and Kathryn touched on this as well, that, emotions are high after games, managers and players alike, but particularly managers are hauled in to do interviews. I know before that he did the club interview and he did a Sky interview before he got to the BBC and then eventually to us in the written press. But Kathryn made the point as well. He's not got credit in the bank. He did inherit a difficult situation, admittedly, but
that post match stuff. Sorry to put in between, and I know Burns wants to come in as well. I having never been there as a manager, I've been there on the odd occasion as a player and understand the reaction of some players and have seen it. But having worked in the media now for 10 years and knowing what it entails from a commitment to speaking to the fans and also financially what they get out of it. Sorry, get yourself out here and speak to every single person that's here. The reason you can come to the Championship and, to be brutally honest, will earn better money in this second tier of English football than most other European leagues. The average Championship manager's wage is pretty hefty. So that's part of his responsibility as a professional. You might lose your shit doing it, but sorry, answer his question, answer their question. What you way along? The reason it's what is it? The highest attended, one of the highest attended divisions in the top 5 leagues of European football, because people care. People come to watch. People pay money to watch you. So I'm sorry, give us half an hour after the game to explain what we've just paid to see.
Prutts, Burnsy, I know you're waiting on. Prutts, I totally agree with you. I absolutely agree with you, and I think that's what a lot of managers and players forget, that the influence of media money and what it does. And I know Tim doesn't enjoy doing media. Not everybody does, and that is
part of the job. I don't. In this day and age, that's got to be, if whatever badge you do, a B license, A license, Pro license, to manage that. I don't know the ins and outs of it, and I should know more about it than I do if I'm spouting off about it. That is inherently as important as being able to set a team up on a pitch nowadays. Categorically, Kathryn hit the nail on the head. It's a PR exercise, and when things aren't going well, I mean, it's damage limitation. You've got to be almost overtly nice about the people that are backing you to keep them in the kind of the circle of trust, don't you? Because otherwise, the minute you start pointing fingers at the 20,000 people that turn up every other week, then I mean, it's akin to a politician coming out and pointing the finger and everyone going, Jesus Christ, what are you talking about? It's a PR exercise. You've got to keep as many people on side for as long as possible, because every time you walk into a football club, you're always a day closer to when you leave. Every manager's in that position.
Go on, Burnsy. I know you've been hanging on.
I'm conscious Prutts has got to go, and I want him to maybe react to what you might tell us. Talking of the circle of the trust or circle of trust, is the manager still in the owner's circle of trust? What's the owner thinking? Baz, can you give us any inkling?
I've spoken at length over the last few weeks to Adrian, and I think let's be realistic about it. He's put his neck on the line here. He sacked Liam for his reasons. It was a breakdown of the relationship between him and Liam. He made the choice. He then went after Tim Walter, and he's put a lot of stock in Tim. He still backs him. He still thinks that his style of football is the right one. So perhaps does that cloud Adrian's judgment going forward? Does that, because he's put so much, of his neck on the line for this appointment, that maybe, with Shota was a close friend of his, but he made that decision. He'd made a decision at the beginning of the international break back in 2022, delayed it for 10, 12 days before eventually, going through with it and sacking him. I think perhaps he gives Tim Walter a bit longer because of what he's put on the line to get him here. But ultimately, the club have worked tirelessly to get fans back on side and to build that relationship with the fans. He can't afford to lose that relationship. And while he can't just go by what fans on social media are saying,
to sack the manager?
But I think when you lose
to sack the manager,
say again.
Can he afford financially to sack the manager? He's got a 3-year contract.
I don't think that comes into it. I think if he feels it's the right decision for the football club, he'll boot him out. But once you look, there's always a lot of noise on social media. That's you can park that. But when your home crowd is so vociferously against their manager as they were on Saturday, that becomes very hard to get away from. We'll find out a lot more tomorrow night at Oxford, because away crowds generally they have a kind of a greater amount of tolerance than home crowds, perhaps, across football. So if they lose tomorrow night, and I never think we should be in a situation where it's, well, if he wins tomorrow night, he's okay, because that's too short-termism. For me, I think it's gone past the point of no return. I've said before, I don't think this style has longevity in the Championship. Regan Slater's comments in the press, that, there are players that aren't overly happy. We've said it. That's nothing new. We've said that for the duration. I don't think the players have bought as a collective, particularly individually, have bought into what he wants to do. I don't think some of them are happy. One or two of them wanted to get out in the summer. One or two of them did get out in the summer. So for me, I think it's just a matter of time. But I don't think the owner financially can. If he needs to sack him, he'll sack him. But it comes down to when the owner thinks, right, this isn't going to work. There's too much noise. The players aren't completely, although results. As we say, you keep coming back to the point that they have drawn the last 3 games, having led in those 3 games. So they're not getting hammered. They didn't lose to Portsmouth as much as it felt like they did. So Prutts, it's a curious one, isn't it? It's a really, really curious one. If you're the owner, what are you thinking right now? I know you've got to get going in a minute.
I think you're right to say that you can't kind of go game by game, because that then suggests that all the groundwork that you put in, the due diligence that you've done to get a certain type of manager and a certain type of football into the building is all for nothing, really, isn't it? It's short-termism in its literal sense. What doesn't help in situations such as this, and having not seen a full 90 minutes of Hull City across the season, having seen bits and bobs of them, and we've spoken here at length, is the type of football that he does want to play, and it's even boring myself talking about the type of football, doesn't really shake up a fan base in a situation such as this. If they went to Oxford and went, do you know what? It might not be pretty, but we're going to go high energy all over the pitch. We're going to chase everything. These are all such basic fundamentals. We don't give Oxford a minute's peace. We make sure that we as Hull City go to a place in Oxford where historically over the last 20 years, 25 years, first time Oxford have been back at this level. Hull City in that time have been a Premier League football club. They've been in an FA Cup final. So in recent history, it's a bigger team. It's a bigger football club. But we go there as Hull City go there as underdogs and just absolutely go after Oxford. We don't kick off and get all the way back to the goalkeeper and then stand there for 10 seconds inviting the press. You go and actively make things happen. That's what then gets fans, I think, off the seats. And then I think that there's that kind of bit more patience and forgiveness for when things aren't going well, when it looks as if City are throwing the kitchen sink at it. Now, that's probably why I've never been a manager, because philosophy then potentially goes out the window. And then if you come in with a big philosophy and then, as one of the tweets said, about 13 games in chucking it out the window, then you kind of go, well, hang on, he's based a career on this so far. So after a dozen games of things not being great at City is completely changed it. Where's the kind of sticking to your priorities and fundamentals? So it's a really tough one. I don't envy the manager, the coach, the owner for being in that position, but he's put himself in that position. Is he slightly weakened in making this next decision without Tan next to him? Do we read more into that situation with regards to how Tim is with the fans at this moment in time? We spoke the other week about Tam moving on, didn't we? And preempting and second guessing potentially why. Had he seen something around the corner with the way the football was being played, or the interaction or the relationship between manager and fans? I don't know. So it's a curious one. What always helps is wins. What always helps is high energy performances where collectively City put the pressure on the opposition and don't invite pressure onto themselves. But I fear that potentially going early and getting wedded to this style of play means that whilst the manager is here, that's what exactly you'll see.
Absolutely. Prutts, I know you've got to,
yes.
Got to get on. So you've got
to go to the dentist.
Yes. You've got to go to the dentist. You're being chaperoned, aren't you? Somebody's got to take you.
Yeah, no, I just take mine out and clean them with a horse brush and then put them back in. But it's my daughter's braces. Such is the vanity of a 15-year-old, isn't it? It's horrendous.
Well,
anyway, it's been fun. I've been on my soapbox again. That's 2 episodes on the bounce. I'll try and calm down next time.
It's always a pleasure.
Never a chore. Anyway, I'll leave the voice of reason to Kathryn speaking to you 3 whoppers. Anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Love you all lots.
Love you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
So, yeah, thanks to Prutts for that little short cameo. Kathryn, one stat that I think we've seen throughout the last few weeks is the amount of touches that the goalkeeper has. I think in most games in recent weeks, Pandor's probably had 15 times as many touches as the centre forward, whether that be João Pedro or Chris Bedia. I think there was only Charlie Hughes and Alfie Jones on Saturday who had more touches than the goalkeeper. Is that a symptom of the style of play? But is it also a problem of how they play, that they aren't getting the ball forward quickly enough and being able to involve their attacking players enough?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, maybe we should play Pandor up front if he's having so many touches. Maybe we just swap him round and see if that works.
What's Alan Fettis doing? What's Fettis doing?
You never want your goalkeeper having that many touches, because that's unless we were kind of saying the complete opposite of what we were told we were going to be getting. That's what we saw under Liam. We were kind of complaining under Liam when it was all being played around the back, goalkeeper, defenders. I'm sure Fletch might have given a similar stat about Alfie Jones potentially last season constantly touching the ball when Liam was in charge. So, I mean, yeah, it's not what the fans want to see. And as good as I think Pandor has been, to be fair, after what was a little bit of a shaky pre-season, I don't really want him on the ball. I want him making the saves and kind of kick-starting the attacks. I don't want him kind of passing it back and forward with the centre-backs for most of the game.
Fletch sort of made this point in the analysis stuff on Sunday that that these are we're dealing with championship footballers here. These are elite level professional footballers, and whoever was in charge, and I sort of cynically made the point of you could put Paddington Bear in charge, and that team would create. They would play. There would be nice passages of play. They would create something, and at times you think, "Oh, that was nice." And there were on Saturday again. There were 2 or 3 moments. The goal came from one of lovely ball from Charlie Hughes out to Balumi, crisp finish. And there were 1 or 2 other moments they played from the back, but that is so few and far between. They had 72% possession against Portsmouth, 3 shots on target, and all of those 3 came in the first half. I always try and say you can make stats for any narrative that you wish. If you pro against either or. But that is damning, isn't it? That they've had so much of that ball, and most of it's been between Charlie Hughes, Alfie Jones, and the goalkeeper.
Yeah, and I had a picture on my phone from the Sheffield United game that, we don't have the means of screen sharing on this, but I remember when they played Sheffield United, it was about 20 minutes in, and I referenced it at the time. There was one moment where they actually played it. I think it was into Irma, who then broke forward. And I still think that's the best attack that the side have had this season.
Didn't
because of one thing.
Abu Kamara had a chance or something like that.
Yeah, but the key thing is it went through the centre mid, and it's so I can't butter it up in any other way from saying, can't we just pass to the central midfielders more? That's why I put a stat out last night on social media about the average number of passes. The average number of passes that the centre mids make. Simons is 81st and Casey Palmer is 85th in the entirety of the championship for average passes a game, and they're the highest too. That can't be right. How can it be that the midfielders see so little of the ball when it's ingrained in our footballing culture that midfielders are either there to pass the ball, win the ball back, keep the shape, or do a bit of in between? They're just bypassed. So what's the point of them being there? And what's the point of them signing 5 new ones in the summer transfer window if you're not going to have a system that beds them into the team and gives them more responsibility?
Well said, Fletch. And Casey Palmer seems to be spending most of the time on the bench anyway. So he's done well to get to the heady heights of 80 odds in the championship. I can't understand why he's not playing more, by the way. But that's maybe a side issue we can discuss later if we've got time or not. It's nuts, but he obviously doesn't believe in playing through the midfield, and I just
bonkers.
I don't get it, and unless there's going to be a sudden revelation, there's going to be a day it suddenly clicks, and you think, that's what he's been trying to do. I just, I don't see it happening. Chris Gilliard sends us this on the 1904 Club. I expected lower mid-table, says Chris. It's a self-inflicted rebuild. I would agree with both of those statements. But just for the love of God, Tim, switch it up. Make going to City somewhat fun again. The football is tedious, slow, and utterly predictable for the fans and the opposition scouts. And the Lemon Kid, as the real Simon Cowell would say, it's a yes from me, David, in terms of sacking the manager. And Robin Orty says there were positive signs at Derby, but his reaction to Mike White and the hint from Regan Slater that he doesn't talk one-on-one to the players suggests a deep problem. Fletch, you're going to make a point?
Fletch, before I come to you, that Derby game, and Kathryn, you can, because you were there as well. That was really, I know we talked about this before last week, but that for me was really frustrating at Derby, because at the start of both halves, City were dominant. They had the ball. The Derby were poor. The Derby crowd were getting angry with their own team because they kept giving the ball away and sitting deep. That for me was, Derby were rubbish, but City weren't good enough to go and win that game. Yes, they scored a good goal through Simons and got in front. Conceded a really bad goal to get level to allow Derby to get level. Never really looked like winning the game after that. The reaction to conceding is clearly a bit of a problem just now. But that Derby game summed up where City are at for me at the minute. And it was backed up then again against Portsmouth, against two teams that have just come up. Portsmouth bottom of the table. Derby, although had got a decent home record up to that point, were absolute rubbish. And there for the taking. City were too negative. They just weren't good enough to go and beat a really poor team. And it was there for the taking. And I think good teams, will go and exploit. And it seems, again, I come back to the point that City are, they're lower mid-table, but they're only 5 points off the top 6. They're 3 points off the bottom 3. So they're kind of like, they're treading water and nobody's ripping this division up. But you feel there's so much more to come from them. But for me, the manager's tactics is holding them back. Yes, we know we've talked about the striker or the lack of quality in attack, but equally, Pedro showed on Saturday. If you get the ball into him quickly and he can get in front of his marker, he can put the ball in the back of the net. But the style of play is, for me, the style of play is not working. It's tedious. It's boring. There's no enjoyment in watching it. I don't think there's any enjoyment in playing it. Based on what we're seeing from the players. Yeah, they've won 3 games in a row, but we said at the time, is that just, you can only beat what's in front of you, obviously, but with that probably papered over the cracks. There were issues at those 3 respective clubs. They've not looked like winning a game since or before. And the style of play, for me, is just mind-numbing. And it's not this attacking, that we've been promised. And we've only seen in parts of 3 games that they won glimpses of it. And that isn't for me enough. They've only kept one clean sheet. They've played 13 games. They've kept one clean sheet, Fletch.
I thought he was going to go to Kathryn, to be brutally honest. But
Well, I'll go to Kathryn after you because
I'll just really quickly, Kathryn, before you jump in. I did a little poll last night. I just wanted to add to what Baz is saying. And the question was, is the style of play better? Do you feel the style of play is better in comparison to last year? Now, again, the numbers aren't gospel for the whole fan base, but about 400 people have answered it. Thank you very much. 80% said no. About 6% said yes, and the rest say it's still a work in progress.
It is better. It isn't better than that. I don't think any City fan can genuinely sit here and go, what we're watching now is better than what Liam. And yes, at times at home, Liam's football was stodgy, but away from home, they zipped it. At least you could see what Liam wanted to do, whether you agree with it or not, and it was to your liking or not. You could see what Liam was trying to do. Under Tim, I'm not sure. I still don't understand what he's trying to do, Kathryn.
No, I think that's the problem. I think the only thing that gave me a little bit of encouragement at Derby was that it didn't feel quite as chaotic as the start of the season, where we were constantly passing to the opposition. And we still do that on too many occasions in our own half, but it felt like those really early games in the season, it was constantly like passing to the opposition within our own penalty area and somehow getting away with it. It felt like we've stopped doing that, and that kind of at Derby, I was like, okay, well, at least we've seemed to have settled down a little bit. But the problem is, I don't see this kind of attacking style. I'm not excited by what I'm watching. I'm just kind of thankful that it's not like literal heart attack football in our own penalty area. That was kind of my only sort of positive. And then I left that game thinking, as kind of what Baz said, Derby, not very good, but we weren't good enough to beat them. And that was the problem. Same on Saturday. Same on a number of occasions. I was encouraged by the game against Sunderland because I felt like we weren't hugely outplayed and they were top of the league. But that again, that was just because we weren't blown away by them. Burnley didn't kind of blow us away either. But again, they missed a very good chance right at the end. Probably should have won. And it's just kind of I'm just not really. I'm not excited by what I'm watching. That's the difference. At least with Liam Rossini, and you can kind of go back and say there were times where it was boring. I remember that early part of last season when they beat Stoke away 3-1, I think it was. And the third goal was brilliant. It was kind of like loads of different passes. That was exciting. It might not have been kind of like Jurgen Klopp style exciting, but it was at least sort of like, wow, we've just passed it around everyone and then we've gone and scored. We could do that at times. I've not seen any evidence of us doing anything similar under Tim Volter, and unless things start to click soon, as we've kind of said earlier in the show, I suppose it brings us back to that kind of back him or sack him. Unless suddenly things start to click, I'm not sure where he goes from here.
Burnsy, is part of the problem here team selection, and in fairness to Tim, losing players like Liam Miller isn't going to help him. Liam Miller is a key player, one of the best wingers in the Championship, and they spent all summer trying to get him, and now he's out for the season. Abu Kamara went off on Saturday late on. Obviously, he got done in his own box. He gave away the foul. He had to come off. From what I gather, it's not. He did leave the MKM Stadium in a protective boot. His right foot was in a protective boot, but I don't believe it's too serious. He might not be available for Tuesday night at Oxford, but I don't feel it. I don't believe, from what I've been told, it's anything too bad. But there's constant chopping and changing, and I look at that team on Saturday against Portsmouth. I'm thinking, how the hell is Ryan Giles not playing? He's one of the best attacking left backs in the league. And while Cody Drame has done really well, he's not an attacking left back. So you're basically writing off that side of it. He made three midfield changes in the second half on Saturday. Took all three midfielders off and put three more on. Made no impact. In fairness, there have been times this season when these changes have made an impact. So let's try and be fair. But there isn't a settled side, is there? And it's on Saturday, Betty was out, Pedro came in, he scored. There's just so much chopping and changing all the time, and as we said last week and we said before, you can't build those relationships on the pitch if you constantly got a new teammate or it's chopping and changing. And I know injuries can't be helped, but some of the stuff can be, and it I guess it conforms to that theory that it's just all a bit messy and nobody really knows what's going on, and the players perhaps aren't completely easy with what they're being asked to do, and their performances are reflecting that, and it's just a bit all over the place.
Yeah, I think it's to some extent it might be a necessity. He's looking for a blend. Maybe nobody's grabbing the shirt. Maybe they don't really understand, or they're finding it difficult to do what he wants them to do. I go back to Casey Palmer. I think, given his pedigree in this division, he'd be in my starting 11. But they don't really play. Well, I don't know how they play. If I'm honest,
No, they don't. That is the key thing that we keep saying.
Trying to get my head around it.
Yeah, there's no identity. There is no structure. There's no real structure. And at times you think, oh, that was nice. But I come back to the point that these are elite level professional footballers, and that whoever was in charge of them, they would be able to do something because they've got enough about them off their own back to pass and move and have an idea of what they're being asked to do. But as a collective, as a structure, it's just messy.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say in the players' defence, I'd probably say a bit more in the players' defence. While they may be struggling for it all to sink in terms of how he wants to play, I don't think there's any lack of effort from them. I don't detect there's any throwing the manager under the bus or anything like that. They're trying their hardest for him to try and make it work, but it's just not working. And I was clinging to, including the owner, is suddenly the penny will drop and it'll work. And in fairness to Tim Walter, he's been saying that all along, hasn't he? That it will come together. It was a rushed squad. They have to learn how I want to play and everything like that. But the signs at the moment are not good. Grumpy old Jeff says to the 1904 club, I'm fed up with all the faffing and farting about on the ball for no effect. He summed it up beautifully. It's not a phrase I think you'd hear on Match of the Day necessarily, but I think he's bob on there. It's really depressing now to go to a game. I think a lot of fans are similarly minded, and that's why there's no atmosphere. There is encouragement for the team coming from the stands. But Ken Brisbane says, time to sack him. Seen enough to be convinced players do not like how he does things. He seems ill-prepared going into games, can't adapt to opponents. I doubt he even does any research, and if it doesn't work, makes desperate substitutions and jumps around a lot. Well, the adapting to the opponents is because I think he's wedded to his philosophy, isn't he? This is how we will play, and regardless of what the opposition are doing, we're going to play that way. And Matty Hayward says, don't think the fans have felt this out of touch with the regime since Adjun took over. Too much uncertainty, lack of structure or clarity. And Liam's replacement simply isn't good enough. The players don't seem happy. The fans certainly aren't. Since May, it's been a shambles. And Tiger Dore says, time to go. One of the worst records after 13 games since Brown left. Unproven system questioned by most pundits. No reputation in the EFL, so no pulling power. Bizarre behaviour and apparently lacking in emotional intelligence. Adjun is accountable, but will he admit it didn't work? I'll leave those with you on the 1904 club.
Go on, Fletch. You've got your finger pointing.
There's a lot to unpack there, isn't there? Wow. Well, from a tactical point of view, I stand by what I say earlier. I just think they need to include the midfield more. Let's just box that off. Now, does he? What I want to see to give him, if he's to get credit back with the supporters, he has to show some flexibility in just having that sense of, why don't we for 2 games tweak it? Not saying rip it up and change it completely, but at least show some adaptability and say, well, why doesn't player A or player B get on the ball more? Or do we drop back 10 yards? Whatever he wants to do. But I remember when Grant McCann was in charge and he used the famous phrase, Plan B, was to make Plan A better. And at the time, he didn't have the players to make Plan A better. And sadly, that was his downfall out of the Championship. Credit to him, he got them back up. I can't see him changing. And
he's not going to change. He is not going to change.
The stubbornness is going to be his downfall. And he might look. His numbers are great before Hull City. He's got the track record to prove that he's a decent enough manager who can win games of football. But they'll go to Oxford, and I can't see them doing any more than nicking a point. And then you're going against West Brom, who are one of the best counter-attacking teams in the Championship. And if they're at their full capacity against them, they'll pick them off time and time again. And that's not me. That's just not me being
alive. On genuinely, and no disrespect, Corberan is a master tactician, and he's got that ability, hasn't he? And against this style of play, he's got the power to make it look ridiculous.
And when we had George on earlier in the season from the Not the Top 20 pod, I remember watching their Championship predictions at the start of the season, and they referenced what Tim Volter said in the newspaper about, I'm open like a book, nobody can copy it. The reason why nobody copies it is because it doesn't work. And I know that sounds really flippant and rude. I know it's really flippant and rude, but the numbers speak for themselves. It's 3 wins against 3 teams who didn't play full chat on the night against a Hull City team who played well. To the credit, played well. But you play what's in front of you. They didn't beat Burnley at home, who were understaffed on the night, didn't play to the best of their ability. And, it'll sound cocky, but I'm quite, in a way, glad that what I said after the QPR game is still standing, in that I still believe they haven't beat someone at their full potential, and I'm still waiting for it. That's why we've got 5 games without a win. One of them is against bottom of the table Portsmouth, who, with all due respect, Hull City should be beating based on what they did last season. They've gone backwards.
Kathryn, 2 games now before the international break, and we know owners can get twitchy in the September break, particularly the October break. But November is really the last opportunity owners have to make a change that gives them time, obviously, before the next round of fixtures going into Christmas, and then of course the transfer window on the 1st of January. This week, these next 2 games are absolutely pivotal. Where are you, as we get towards the close, where are you at with kind of this week and these next 2 games?
I just can't believe Fletcher's mentioned Grant McCann on a Monday morning before 11 a.m. It's far too early for that. It's just taking me back a couple of years. Reminded me of a lockdown game against Wigan. It's all coming back.
Oh, God, don't mention that.
Yeah, I think he needs a result in one of them at least. I think the problem is Oxford is a tricky game, but it's the better of the 2. So if you lose that and you're relying on the West Brom one, we go back to that kind of taking it game by game thing, don't we? Where if you're fighting for your job in 2 games, it's never a good thing.
No.
He needs a result of some kind against Oxford, I think, and then anything you can kind of get against West Brom. Under normal circumstances, I would say a defeat at home to West Brom, who are in the playoffs, it's not the end of the world. But if it follows after a defeat against Oxford, suddenly it feels like it does. Again, I don't know who is out there that would come in. I'm sure there are a number of options that are better in terms of people that know that managers are available. Mick McCarthy's not going in the jungle from what I hear, so he might be around, unless he goes in later. But he's not on that list of lineup as people thought he might be. Swindon swooped in for Ian Holloway, so he's gone as well. So Neil Warnock might be around, though. So, of those kind of old school managers that we have. But yeah, I've got to get off. Fletcher's mention of Grant McCann might be the reason why, but no, I've got to get off. But hopefully, I'll be going to Oxford tomorrow and seeing a result of some kind, and everything will be fine again, and we'll be back to thinking we might be turning it around. But sadly, I think it might be two difficult games, and then Adrian will have a decision to make in the international break. But I'm not convinced it's one he will make at this point.
Brilliant. Kathryn, thank you so much for joining us on the 1904 Club this week, and safe travels down to the Kassam Stadium on Tuesday night. Burnsy, just to finish, to echo really what Kathryn said, 2 games this week before the 2-week break. If he doesn't get anything in the 2 games, he's going to be nervous, isn't he? Going into that 2-week break, that's a long time for the owner to sweat and be acutely aware of what fans are saying and shouting, particularly at the MKM Stadium.
Yeah. And I don't know. I'm not seeing any great improvement, really. Couple of messages to finish up with. Well, loads of messages. Thank you for all of those. Craig Bell says, tomorrow night at Oxford is pivotal. Lose that, and he may not make it to Sunday. Personally, I think the players look confused and deep down don't believe in his system. So he'll do well to make it anywhere near Christmas. And Anthony says, I think the sack would be harsh, even given the last few results, which is only 1 loss in 4. I think there was improvement in the Sunderland, Burnley and Derby games, maybe gone out of the window against Portsmouth, though. I'd give him till January personally, and to get a worthwhile striker in. So fair and balanced. Thank you for all your contributions.
Absolutely. And let's hope that we can talk about 3 points Oxford, because it wouldn't surprise me if they went there and won that game. That's the nature of the Championship. You know, they've not looked like winning the game really since for 90 minutes since the final win of that 3-game run. So, but you never know. This is the Championship. This is Hull City. The whole thing is bonkers. You wouldn't rule anything out, but he needs a result and he needs to get the fans back on side, because, as I said, once you start, however you do it, and however unintentional it was or whatever your reasoning for criticising supporters, that is never going to go down well. And when you are not winning games of football, and you are playing your football for much of a 90-minute display is dross, you're on a sticky wicket. Fletch, anything final from you before we head off into the ether?
Win both games. That's that would sum it up nicely. I think that's what he needs to do, just to get the fans, or some section of the fans, back on side. And I don't think it's just him. I think there'll be others behind him, of course, who are all in this, obviously tactically, and they obviously think it works. That's why they'd be by his side as well. But yeah, I'm desperate. I'm desperate for things to turn around.
And and just finally, that is the point. I think it's worth emphasising that nobody, there's no narratives. We all want Hull City to be challenging for a place in the Premier League. We all want to be watching Hull City play in the Premier League and compete at the top level. That's where we want them to be. So there's nobody takes any joy in seeing, Tim Walter struggling and Hull City playing like they are and, just not winning games. That isn't the reality of it. I know people think that sometimes is the case, but genuinely isn't the case. We all want Hull City winning games of football and playing at the top level. But ultimately, we are here to talk about it. We are here to give our opinion and our insight and, have a chat about it. And, that's what we do. So here's hoping that Hull City can find a way to win a football match and do that at Oxford on Tuesday night, and then back it up on Sunday afternoon against West Brom. Burnsy, thank you so much for your time. Hope your little illness dissipates and you're feeling a little bit better tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Fingers crossed. We'll see.
Fletch, thank you very much. We'll be back. We will have a review show at some point, either Wednesday or Thursday, to look back on the game at Oxford and then a closer look at West Brom on Sunday. So I know there's been an absolute outpouring of comment and interaction after Saturday's game against Portsmouth. So thank you very much for everybody that has taken the time to get in touch. And hopefully we've been able to give a balanced view of the situation, admittedly, as much as it doesn't look particularly great. But thank you for getting in touch. Continue to do so. And we'll be back again soon. And if you are heading to the Kassam Stadium on Tuesday night, have a safe journey there and a safe journey back. Up the Tigers.